Hello, Eli. Our group consists of Abby, myself, Sarah, Vahit, Harpreet, and Priyanka. And together we've decided to explore Olympic data ranging from 1896 in Athens, Greece to 2020 Tokyo. And we've explored roughly 300,000 records, trying to identify trends and patterns over time. Ultimately, our goal with our analysis was to determine how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the various aspects of this year's Summer Olympic Games, and specifically to what extent. Our analysis will highlight for you country and athlete participation, Olympic disciplines or sports, rankings and medal counts, all over time and from this year specifically. We're trying to paint a clear picture of how the Olympic Games have changed over the years and the impact the pandemic has specifically had on the Games this summer.
Hello, my name is Abiola Adeyemi, and today I'll be presenting on the country participation of Olympic game over the years, starting from 1896 to 2020. And I represented this information using time series analysis and, of course, bar charts to show how the countries have participated over time. As you can see, starting from 1896, a lot of countries have participated well in Olympics, not until 1980, where it experienced a sharp decline. And from 1980, it began to increase, 1984, 1996, and of course 2016 and 2020. And from this time series, it is crystal clear that 2016 Olympics witnessed the highest number of country participation, where 205 countries participated in the Olympics. And 2020 Olympics, just 92 countries participated in it. Of course, the reason is not far-fetched because of the pandemic that has been ongoing since 2019 and is still active till date. However, one will begin to wonder why there was a sharp decline in the country participation in Olympics in 1980. From this time series, one can see that just 80 countries participated in the 1980 Olympics. And that would make one to wonder what could be the reason. So, based on our investigation, it was observed that over 60 countries, including the United States of America, decided to boycott the 1980 Olympics. And the reason for doing that is not far-fetched, is because of the protests against the Soviet Union invasion of Afghanistan. So that was what brought about the boycotts, because in the 1980s there was several wars, the insurgents attacking the Afghanistan country. So because of that, other countries decided to boycott it, and that is why we have a sharp decline in the participation. Now I would hand over to my other colleagues who will talk about the other aspects of this project. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Vahid, and I will be explaining about our findings in Olympic disciplines and the effect of the COVID-19 to the Olympic disciplines in Tokyo 2020. So the first thing that comes to mind is to check the number of disciplines throughout the history. So 13 new disciplines added since the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Games to today's Tokyo Olympics, which now has 47 disciplines. And the number of competitive sports in the Olympic Summer Games has increased by more than 2 times since the 1980 Moscow Summer Olympics. If you look on the right side, the interesting finding that we discovered is athletics. The participant in athletics types of the sports would always dominate it throughout the history. But now the other other disciplines are catching up because the new disciplines are added to the Olympics, and there are more participants in the other beside the athletics types. So athletics in this year's Olympics, athletics has the highest participants with 184. Then rowing is following that with 142, and football has the 134 participants, and the average participation is 46.4. If you look at the throughout the history until today, there are a total of 22,000 participants in athletics, and there is a huge gap between the other the other disciplines. And average throughout the history, the average is 1,327. Thank you.
One of the topics we decided to explore was the number of Olympic athletes. More specifically, we wanted to look at the total number of athletes attending Olympic events over time. So you see here, I've got 3 years marked. And you can see an increase after the boycott of the Russia games in Moscow in 1980. And in 2016, Rio de Janeiro, we're seeing the most Olympic athletes we've ever seen. Now, from 2016 to this year's Olympics in Tokyo, you see a significant drop in numbers. We're talking from 11,174 in 2016 to only 2,174 athletes this year. That is a drop of 9,000. When you look at the bar charts and the data to see that broken down, it's clear that many of these countries that usually participate in Olympics have opted to not send any athletes at all to the games. They just said, we're going to sit this one out. And that's likely due to the risk of the pandemic and potentially contracting COVID-19. Meanwhile, other countries who decided to compete, they actually chose to increase the number of athletes competing for their country. You think about it, they're likely aware that a lot of the countries are either going to sit out or sit most of their athletes out as they're unwilling to risk their athletes' health. Because a lot of the competition has opted to do this, the countries who are participating, all of a sudden, their odds of winning medals and their odds of, ranking higher in the final standings, those odds increase. On the left-hand side here, the left-hand side of the line chart, you'll see I've got these bar charts. And this bottom green one is the average number of athletes sent to represent a country at your typical summer games. So we're looking at the average from 1896 to 2016. So you'll see Bulgaria, here it is, 147 athletes representing Bulgaria at a Summer Olympic game event. If you look up here, you see Bulgaria only sent 41 athletes to Tokyo to compete in the 2020 Summer Games. Whereas on the other hand, Japan on average sends 288 athletes to the Summer Games. However, this year, they sent 585 athletes. And that's partially because Tokyo is in their home country and it's less risk for them.
Hi Elikin, I'm Priyanka. My story point in this open data visualization storytelling is to present whether the COVID-19 pandemic had any impact on the overall performance of the countries in the Olympics or not. So for this comparison, we have chosen the historic data as well as the Tokyo 2020 Olympics data. The historic data is having in the period of 1896 to 2016. It consists of all the Olympics data in this period. So, for the representation, I have chosen the scatter plot. For better representation, I have shown the variations in the circles for the circles in this graph. So for the representation of gold medals, I have selected yellow circle, and for the silver I have selected blue circle, while for bronze I have selected the maroon circles. So from this graph it can be seen that United States is in the leading position with a total gold medal count of 2472 and a silver count of 1333, bronze count of 1197. And we can see that Russia is in the second position with a total gold count of 1220, which is nearly the same as the bronze count of United States, USA. And the silver and the bronze medals owned by Russians are approximately the same, which is 974 for silver and 994 for bronze. So Germany is in the third position, while Great Britain and France are in the fourth and fifth positions. And while coming to the Tokyo 2020 Olympics medals count, USA, we can see that in this graph also, USA is in the first position with a total medal count of 295, while Russia had been replaced by China with a difference in the medal count of 1. And while coming to the fourth and fifth positions, France and Great Britain had changed their positions, and Japan is in the sixth position. So from this comparison, I can say that the COVID-19 had an impact on the overall performance of the athletes and the total medal counts won by the country. But despite the fact that there is an impact on the performance, there is no difference in their positioning. There is no difference in their positioning on the Olympics table. Thank you.
To help tie our story together, we wanted to review some of the key data findings that we discovered or noticed along our way. Firstly, the number of countries at the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games is the lowest number the world has seen since the 1980 Games in Moscow, Russia. 113 of the 205 countries that participated at the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Summer Games opted to not even compete in Tokyo this year. The number of competitive sports in the Olympic Summer Games has increased over time, but more specifically, the number of disciplines has increased by 2.04 times since these 1980 Moscow Games. And since the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Games, 13 new disciplines have been added. Thirdly, the total number of competing athletes has dropped significantly, so you can tell that the pandemic was a concern for a lot of these countries and a lot of these athletes. However, the countries that usually rank or perform well and receive medals outperformed in the competition during this year's Summer's Game as well. It's safe to say that the pandemic didn't really affect the performance in that sense. And to review the coronavirus impact on the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Summer Games, you consider the Olympic game events typically happen every 2 years, with a 4-year gap between each of the winter and summer events. From the first Olympic Games in Athens, Greece in 1986, to the more recent event held this year in Tokyo, The data shows an increasing trend for each of the categories that we examined, not including the number of athletes. With high-performing countries and their athletes displaying consistency in Tokyo this year, it's clear that the pandemic made a little impact. However, the data indicates certain changes specific to this year's Olympic Games, which is likely a direct result of the pandemic itself. And although the number of countries competing in the 2020 Tokyo Summer Olympics showed an all-time low, many of the countries attending opted to send more athletes instead. So with this, we conclude our presentation, and we just want to thank you for taking your time to listen and watch our presentation.